What dating advice would I offer my children growing up in a world of hookup culture, casual sex, high body counts, and OnlyFans? Welcome back to hifam. I'm Avital. I'm the mother of 5, and I'm here on a mission to help you build a strong family culture and to raise your children in alignment with your values, to raise kids who are resilient, strong, capable, value-driven individuals, and to really enjoy motherhood. If all of that sounds great, make sure to hit the subscribe button and let's get into it. Today, I'm sharing my somewhat controversial, maybe countercultural dating advice that I will offer my children as they enter into the teen years. And this might just seem traditional to you, but the truth is that dating and the entire world of finding a partner to pair bond with, to live our life with, is something that is deeply individual and personal, but also really culturally influenced. So this is going to depend a lot on whether you come from a Christian background, from a secular background, where you live in the world, what country you live in, what town you live in, is it urban, is it suburban? All of those things are going to influence you as it influences me. I grew up in a modern Orthodox Jewish home, and I'm raising my kids in the same community. And so we have quite traditional and religious-based values in our home, but I'm going to articulate for you why I would recommend these things to my children so that you can start to form your own opinions of what you would recommend to yours. One of the key things I want you to take away from this video is that we as parents need to leave no stone unturned in terms of the guidance that we give our children with. We want to really give them the value system, the moral compass, the clarity of how to live a good life. We owe that to them. We can't just throw them to the wolves out there and be like, good luck, I hope you make good choices, because they're just kids. They don't have fully developed prefrontal cortexes, life experience, and the knowledge and the wisdom. That's what the elders are for. That's what we're for. We're here to guide them and help them to make good life choices. And I know that in the progressive, liberal, Western, individualistic societies that we live in, we often just want to defer every decision to our children. Like, whatever you decide, it's your life. Who am I to say? Live and let live. Whatever you do is fine. All decisions are equal. There is no judgment. There is no hierarchy. As long as you're not harming anyone, as long as it's consensual. But those ideas actually cause us to abdicate our role as our children's, for lack of a better word, spiritual guide, right? We're here to actually help them pave the way towards something that is good, that is healthy, that is going to lead to a life of meaning and of substance and of profound, fulfilling relationships. A life that we would be proud of them living. And I think that's well within not only our rights, but also our obligations to give to them. So if you agree with that at all, keep watching and let's get into it. Number 1, I tell my children to date for marriage. I tell them that the whole entire role of dating is to find a life partner. That's what it's about. It's not for fun. It's not for kicks. It's not for casual sex. It's not just because it's cute. It's not because you have a crush when you're 14. Like, there is 0 point, in my opinion, of a boyfriend when you're 14 or 15 or 16, because it's going to be a stretch and a challenge for it to lead to a real long-term, lifelong, sustained relationship. So this is just my personal opinion. What I personally would guide my children towards is that in your early teen years, it leads to precociousness and distraction to have relationships with the opposite sex, because I also don't want my children having sex at those ages. I don't think it's a good idea for them to have relationships or define themselves as boyfriend and girlfriend. I think they can just have friendships and hang out. And of course, they're going to have crushes, and that's totally normal and healthy. But I wouldn't recommend kind of locking in into labels or relationships. If it happens, it happens, but that wouldn't be my advice. But with that said, as they get into their late teens and early 20s, I would absolutely advise them to start going on dates, to start meeting people, to start being engaged romantically and kind of testing out the field and finding people to be interested in, to go out, to meet friends, to be set up on blind dates. I would rather it doesn't happen through apps, because I really believe in the organic face-to-face connection and friend-to-friend connection. And even through families and, setting up and arranging meetups and dates for people and for young, singles who are mingling. And I know that really dates me. I sound like I've been plucked out of Fiddler on the Roof right now. But the truth is that in some of the communities that I'm part of, matchmaking is not a far-fetched idea. And arranged marriages, not like the type where the parents just completely decide who the kids are going to marry, but arranged marriages in the sense that the family gets involved, that you introduce them, that you look for someone with them, and it's not just all left up to the child. So First thing is dating for marriage. The whole function, the whole technology of dating is driven towards finding a lifelong partner to build a home with, to get married with, to have children with, and not just as kind of a sport, not just as a filler, not just as fun, but really that it has a goal. And therefore, it matters a lot when you start doing it. And of course, who you date, which we'll discuss further on. So number 2 is to get married young. Now, this is a really controversial one. I know a lot of people disagree with it. And by the way, research is kind of iffy on this one, if it's such a good idea or not. A lot of people in my own community think that's a crazy thing to encourage and support. And I get the criticism. There are 1,000,001 reasons why you should defer getting married until you're more mature, until your prefrontal cortex is better developed, until you're financially stable, until you've developed your career. There are lots of different reasons for doing this. But I'll just make the little pitch. As someone who did get married very young, I was 19, I think that there is something about building together. There's something about waiting until you've accomplished all these other things that leads into that myth of readiness that I've discussed. If you haven't watched that video, go watch it next. But this idea that we always have to wait until we're ready is actually causing people in Gen Z and certainly millennials to feel like they're never ready. The truth is that getting hitched, tying the knot, is a big leap no matter when you do it. And it doesn't necessarily become so much easier to take that leap of faith and to commit your life to someone and to make such a big choice as time goes on. In a way, yes, because you get to know yourself better and you feel a bit more maybe stable and on your feet, and you've built a bit of a life and you're a bit more independent and you've gotten more life experience and a more fully developed brain. Maybe you've really matured and that has helped. But in a way, no, because as time goes on, not only are we maybe feeling a lot more pressure because of the biological clock, maybe feeling a lot more picky because we're a lot more specific and a lot more developed, maybe we start to narrow our options in a very unhelpful way as time goes on, as we get older and older. Like a woman in her mid-30s is going to be a lot more discerning and judgmental and picky and knows herself and knows her preferences and a lot less flexible than a woman in her mid-20s. And that has upsides because she might be more precise and more accurate. But it also has downsides because she's going to be less adaptable and less open to various types of relationships. I don't believe there's just one person for us. I don't believe there's just one soulmate out there. I believe that whoever we end up choosing, as long as they have the basic package of, just being a generally good person and they love us and they want to build a similar vision to us, after that, it just takes a ton of work for us to intertwine and intermesh and build together and become great partners. And so I think that when you get married younger, you're often a lot more open to life's experience, a lot more flexible, and a lot more willing to grow together. Your idiosyncrasies and your specificity and your preferences and your choices and your life experiences become something that actually develops side by side with your partner, rather than developing all of that by yourself and then trying to match with a partner out there. In other words, I think it becomes harder to find love later. I also think that there is a very real myth or, misleading idea that has been kind of substantiated into our culture that women should wait. That women should first develop their career, they should first gain all of the financial success and the ambitions out there in the world and climb the corporate ladder or experience lots of things or travel the world or build up your finances or whatever it is that you're supposed to do. And that everything else, like building a family and finding love, can wait till later. And I think it's true to a certain extent, and it works for some women, but it's not what I would personally advise my children to do. I personally think it's a little bit of a risky game to play. I think that the promise of freezing your eggs and having fertility later on in life is overblown. And I know that the statistics of success are much more dismal than most of us care to know or are even made aware of. I think even doctors are often quite misleading about just how easy it is to defer fertility till later, or just how low the risks are for healthy, successful pregnancies, or just how much opportunity you have to have as many children as you want. I know that I would really encourage my kids to have kids. And I think that if you're going to have kids, it's better to have them earlier, when your body is younger, more fertile, stronger, more capable, when you are less aware and anxious about all of the risks and things that could go wrong. And I think it's a great blessing to be a mother young, because you have more energy and you have more flexibility and you're closer to your own childhood. And there are lots of good things about it. I'm not saying we should be reckless. And of course, we do need some financial stability and, a little bit of building towards our careers, like maybe getting our degrees or starting our first job before we can dive in and take on this big responsibility. But what I'm noticing in young people today is that they never feel ready. They never feel ready because none of us ever really are ready. You're never truly ready for marriage or truly ready for parenting, because the truth is that when it comes, it's going to be challenging no matter when. And I would rather that they face those challenges earlier in their lives and they mature through the process, rather than thinking that they can just mature outside of that process and then get hitched and have kids. Does it work for some people? Of course. Do some people not even have this choice because they can't find the right person? Of course. But if I was directing my kids on what to look for, on what to strive for, I would suggest trying to get married young and build together. And getting married young doesn't mean that you immediately have children, but building your home together, building your finances together, figuring out the division of labor and the relationship and, having all those early fights and power struggles and moving through them and maturing and then having the kids early, I think is a wise choice. It's what I personally will be advising my children. And this doesn't throw any shade or any judgment to people who haven't been able to do that or wouldn't choose to do that. I'm just sharing you my controversial choices that I teach my kids. Number 3 is don't play stupid games. I know there's so much kind of manipulations and games and, how you're supposed to date and what you're supposed to do to hook the guy or to get the girl or to make them want more or to play hard to get, or all sorts of terms that pop into my head like negging. What is that? Or all sorts of ideas from the manosphere and from dating apps and ideas and all of that. I would discourage my kids from going down any of those paths. I would encourage them to show up just straightforward, honest, and vulnerable. I like you. You know what? You're not for me. I'm sorry. And just being straightforward and honest about their feelings. It's something I try to teach them inside our household. It's something I try to show them between me and my husband. And it's something I would encourage them to do. I think there is so much mindless nonsense going on and so much energy wasted on convoluted, complicated psychological mind games that people are playing in the dating world. But I think if you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. If you're pursuing someone and making it a really complex, a gamified route that doesn't make much sense, then I think you're going to end up with a relationship that looks like that. A relationship that looks like a lot of heartache and confusion and questioning and ruminating and, hesitation and insecurity. Just a lot of insecurity. Like, what does it even mean? Does he mean what he says? Does he really want me? Does he not really want me? Do I really want him? It just becomes really confusing when you play lots of games. I would suggest that my children ask people out who they want to go out with, go out on dates with them, tell them honestly, hey, I'm really enjoying this, or break up with them straightforward, face to face in an honest, direct communication. I would encourage them to avoid the apps for exactly this reason, because people aren't commodities that you just swipe through. Maybe there are apps that have better algorithms or that treat people with a bit more respect, but I think a lot of it just leads to that casual hookup culture that I want to discourage. But maybe it's a good way of finding people, but I would rather encourage them to find in-person places where people who are likely good candidates for them will be hanging out. Like, think about the type of person you would want to build a life with, the type of person you would want to marry. How old are they? Where do they live? What kind of interests do they have? What kind of things do they do with their time? And hang out there. Strike up organic conversation with them and ask them if they want to spend time with you. This is the way that we used to do it. We used to hit on someone, ask them out, date for a while and get married. And I think it worked pretty well. So I suggest vulnerability, honesty, and in-person connection. Finding a person that you know through friends or through a mutual interest or hobby, or maybe through your local community or church, but trying to find people who are mingling in the same circles as you, who overlap with you. And that leads me to point number 4, which is to look for commonalities in your background and in your values. Listen, could you marry someone from a completely different culture, from a completely different religion, from a completely different set of values who doesn't get your background at all and have a great marriage? You could. And there's nothing wrong with people marrying across societal lines. I think it's beautiful. Me and my husband have some significant background differences, and I think that it can be an amazing, fun, interesting, diversifying strength. But it can also lead to a lot of unnecessary challenge that could be overcome if you look for someone that just aligns more with what you want in your life, that gets you more, that understands your family, that understands your education, that understands your value system, that understands your lifestyle. The truth is that you could have a bad relationship with completely overlapping backgrounds, and you can have a good relationship with very different backgrounds. But it's more likely that you're going to find cohesion, cooperation, collaboration, mutual understanding, great communication with someone who is similar to you, with someone who is from the same religion or none, with someone who grew up with somewhat similar experiences in their life, where there isn't massive chasms of misunderstanding between you. And that's why I actually like the idea of this kind of arranged marriage, in the sense that parents are looking for potentials for their kids in their social circles. Parents who can vet and understand and relate to those other families that would make a good candidate for our children to marry into. I know this sounds so old fashioned, but really think about it. If you build community, if you have meals together, if you eat Thanksgiving, or you go on family vacations, or you meet at your local library, or you go to the same mosque together as other families, you get to see, hey, we run along the same lines. We have the same kind of direction. We value the same kind of things. And therefore, our children would probably make a good match together if all other things fall into place, if they're attracted to each other and they have a great friendship and everything, because they are going to be able to continue this path forward. Yes, this comes from a religious mindset. I fully admit that. But I think that there's something to learn from it. When I look at ultra-Orthodox communities where they actually arrange marriages, places like the Hasidic community or many communities in India, one of the things I see as a great strength of this is that there is a real focus on matching, on understanding that two people not only need to be attracted to each other, but they also need to share a certain vision for the future, to build a similar house together, to be aligned on what kind of schools they want to send their kids to, on what kind of vacations they're going to go on what kind of neighborhood they're going to want to live in, on who does what. Is this a traditional marriage? Is this a modern egalitarian marriage? Those are the types of things that we get from home and that we often tend to emulate or continue to some degree or another, especially if we liked what we saw at home, if it worked, if we thought it was healthy and good. And so I recommend that my children look for someone with a shared background and values. Number 5, avoid porn. Porn has been proven again and again in research to completely skew and desensitize us to what sexual and romantic relationships should really look like. It makes people think that this instant gratification, that this personal catering, that these over-sensationalized, highly filtered, highly edited, curated, and completely produced sexual encounters are what sex is, are how it works. It also makes it really cheap. It makes it a very lonely and individual and solo experience rather than the connection of two people who love each other. And it's going to always serve as a point of comparison for future sexual encounters in your life. If our children in their teen years and later start engaging in porn, they really run the risk of becoming addicted to it and of desensitizing themselves to their future sexual encounters, where real relationships with real people, with real feelings attached to them and real costs associated to, say, mistreating them or not being sensitive to their needs or not pleasuring them properly are completely avoided, right? They're divorced from reality when you watch porn. You don't really understand the implications and what's necessary and how you build up a real relationship that is respectful and that is satisfactory to both partners in the future. Porn also suggests all sorts of fetishes and kinks and sometimes even perversions that are going to make normal, healthy, marital, and potentially vanilla sex seem boring, maybe by comparison, or seem like it's not enough, or seem like, well, there's so many more fish in the sea, or there's so much more to experiment with. And I'm going to suggest that my children avoid it. I would like to protect them from that entire world because I think it harms our real life relationships. I think it's a great idea to infuse your married sex life with interest and intrigue and maybe some fun kinks or whatever, but I don't think that engaging in and consuming porn is ever going to benefit that sex life in the future. Now, I know a lot of you might come at me in the comments with sex positivity and with the fact that porn is a legal and consensual industry between adults and that maybe it enhances some of your marriages. Maybe you do it together. Maybe you enjoy it. Maybe it helps you discover your sexuality and I shouldn't attach any shame to it. And I'm not attaching shame to it. I'm just saying that I'm comfortable telling my children my own personal controversial opinion, which is that porn does more damage than good and that it's wise to avoid it. I feel as comfortable saying that as I feel that they should avoid cocaine. I just think it's a risky behavior and the benefits do not outweigh the costs. Beyond all of the criticisms that I have for the industry as a whole, and I do, and I don't hide that, I'm also just talking just simply about the cost benefit analysis. Would it benefit your future relationships? My personal opinion is no. I also think that young adults should be hungry for a sexual relationship with their partner. I understand that porn takes the edge off for some people and allows them to go out and date more clear-headed. I get that argument, but I think that the risk of the addiction and the desensitization is not worth it. And this is without even going into the fact that I think it's an exploitative industry and that it's negative for our society as a whole. I'm simply saying, would it benefit our children in finding true love? I don't think so. And now let's go even further and get even more countercultural, because I would also recommend that my children avoid all casual sex. I think they should actually abstain from any sex until they're in a committed relationship. Now, for you, that might not be until marriage, although I hope that it is. It might just be until a level of commitment is achieved and until they are in love and they are looking at each other as lifelong partners. So maybe until they're engaged, for example. But here's the thing. I like Louise Perry, the author of The Case Against the Sexual Revolution. I'll link it and you absolutely should read it if you're enjoying this video. By the way, Louise Perry now also has this book for teens, which seems like a fantastic read and a good idea to get our hands on. But the point that she makes is that sex without love is not empowering. I know that we live in a culture that sees sex as something that you can do casually to just scratch an itch. It's like eating a sandwich. But I just don't buy it. I just don't think it's true. And it just doesn't seem that research actually backs up the idea that on the whole, most people, and especially women, can experience sex as something that is devoid of meaning, that is just casual. Now, are there some women, and certainly many men, who can enjoy casual sex and that just works for them and they just have the high libido and they just want those type of interactions or whatever other reason? Yes, there are. I'm not saying that this is true for everyone, but I would advise my children to link sex with love and commitment. I would advise them that sleeping around casually with people leads to too much heartbreak, confusion, desensitization. It makes sex cheap and easy and does not actually infuse it with the type of meaning, connection, and bonding and pair bonding and life bonding that I would recommend they infuse it with. I think it's less safe. I think it's less psychologically safe. I think for both women and men, actually, it's going to lead to problems down the line in their next relationships, because the more points of comparison we have and the more times that we feel like we were used or like we made a mistake or like sex didn't mean anything, the more baggage we arrive at our future relationships with. And that leads me to the next point, which is linked to this point. Body count actually does matter. I've been watching a lot of young Gen Z women in preparation for this video, and I see that many of them think that body count just doesn't matter. Or they think that a high body count is a plus because it gives them a lot of life experience and it makes them better lovers. But that doesn't seem to be true. It seems to be that the higher body count you have, the more baggage you bring to your future relationships, the more complexity, the more comparisons, the cheaper sex feels to you, the more transactional it feels, the more casual it feels, and the less your partner is likely to trust you and feel safe with you and feel special to you. If you do want to build that lifelong special pair bond with a particular individual, and I really hope my kids do, and I encourage them to, then having a higher body count disrupts that. It makes it harder. Having one or two previous partners is already quite a lot to contend with, but having many makes it really difficult to feel secure, safe, loved, cherished, adored, and special to your partner. If, for example, you had just one for your whole life, that would make that relationship be unique against all other relationships in your life. No one else shares a sexual bond with you except for this one person. And it really puts that relationship in a completely different category than anyone else in a really good way. I think once your partner feels they've shared you with other people and you feel you've shared them with other people, that door kind of is open and it's harder to close it. It's harder to commit. And we see that because people with higher body counts are also more likely to cheat in relationships. So there seems to be some kind of package that goes along with promiscuity that also lends itself to infidelity. Now, correlation does not equal causation, but these things tend to go together. If I see sex as more cheap or more transactional or more easy or more light or more casual, then I'm going to treat it with less gravitas and less of a big deal, even inside a relationship. It's not a stretch to say that those mindsets could be linked. And that's why I would recommend that my children actually lower the quantity of their relationships in general. Date young, date for marriage, and get married young. So that also means split up fast and break up fast from people who you don't see yourself marrying. Give them a real shot, give it a real chance, give it a go, really try and get to know them in depth, see that you have a good match of vision and values. But if it's not there, then break up so that you're not just accumulating long-term relationships. Long-term relationships where you're together for years, where you live together, where you're dating for years, become a real source of frustration and baggage and questioning. And why don't we kind of get to the next level? Why didn't it cement? Why didn't we move forward? And it's easy to get stuck there. Number 8 is to involve your family and your friends. Listen, your family loves you, cares about you, knows you, and can see you from an angle that you can't necessarily see, especially if you're infatuated and full of lust and excitement and those early kind of heady, dizzy feelings of falling in love with someone. But your family might be able to see something that you can't see, like maybe they're not right for you. Maybe they are actually a bad person or a dangerous person, or just not bringing out the best in you, or whatever it might be. Now, that doesn't mean that if your family disapproves, it's necessarily the wrong thing, but I hope to build a good enough relationship with my kids that when they do start dating and bringing people home, they care what I think. They care what my husband thinks. They think, well, my parents are good judges of character. They have a good relationship themselves. They want the best for me. They know me really well. And if they don't like my girlfriend or boyfriend, then there's a reason for that. Now, it's not because I think my kids are the be-all and end-all and no one's ever good enough for them. That would be a really bad kind of attitude to have. In fact, I have the attitude that I can't wait to meet their partners and include them as part of my own kids and really, treat them like one of my own. I want to be really supportive and helpful and loving to their future wives and husbands. But I hope, and I'm trying to build in the idea that marriage isn't just for you. Marriage is an institution for a reason. It's how our community is built. It's kind of the building block of our societies. And so, yes, it also kind of a little bit, just 10% needs to work for your friends and family, because you're not just a lone island individual, solo on your own and completely, disconnected. You're interconnected and we want the best for you. And so if your partner doesn't get along with your friends, if they disapprove, if they don't get along with your family or they disapprove, that should at least give you pause. And same goes for teaching my kids to get to know their partners, families, and friends. Do you like them? Do you connect to them? Can you see yourself being part of this community, part of this family? You're going to spend vacations with them and holidays with them. They're going to be the grandparents of your future children. And if they're dysfunctional or abusive, that's, again, not a complete red flag. It doesn't mean you can't find someone wonderful from a very dysfunctional family. You can, but it adds an extra layer of complexity and difficulty. And marriage is hard enough. So maybe if you are in a position to choose, that's not something you choose. Number 9 is to maintain some level of personal independence. I hope my children fall madly in love. I hope they get very involved in their relationship. I hope they date and get married young and build a relationship together. But I also don't want them to lose their sense of self. Just because I'm not encouraging them to wait 20 years into adulthood to get hitched and have a baby doesn't mean that they should lose themselves completely into homemaking, motherhood, fatherhood, and marriage. I think they still need to develop their personal independence, their career, their hobbies, their interests, their family, and their friendships. It's important to me to teach my children that, yes, you should be interdependent with your partner, but not codependent. You shouldn't live vicariously through them or build your whole identity on this marriage. That's too much pressure on another individual. I hope that they meet you intellectually and they are great friends of yours. And I hope you get a lot of fulfillment on the romantic level out of your relationship. But I want you to know that that's too much pressure on a relationship and it's not good for you. Maintain your sense of self. It's okay to sometimes have different political opinions, to have friends that don't get along and you just go and hang out with them without your partner, to sometimes make choices that are a bit different, or to maintain your hobbies, your friendships, your interests, and your career in a way that is separate from your partner. Yes, build your lives together. Be co-founders of this new household, but don't become enmeshed. And number 10, the advice that I would give my children is to become the partner you want to have. No, you're not going to marry a clone of yourself. But what I mean by this is the advice that I teach inside of my Married You course, which is that you set the tone. If you bring generosity, unconditional love, support, healthy boundaries, all this good stuff, if you are generous about spending time with their family, if you're thoughtful, if you're kind and aware, if you're very loving, if you're a really great communicator, then you stand to expect all of those things back from your partner. You create and elevate to the level of relationship that you want and you deserve. In other words, you have agency in this relationship. You don't just fall in love passively and then expect it to just go well. No, partnership is something that you have to work on primarily by elevating yourself, by increasing your own marriage skills. That's why I teach marriage skills inside of Married You. You can check it out at married-you.com. But the idea is that none of us just know how to do this. Now, I'm really trying to give my children a good role model and example in my own marriage and relationship, but they are also still going to need to hone their marriage skills with their unique personal relationship. Every relationship starts on a little bit of a high, but then quickly enters into some power struggle, some feeling of being misunderstood, of recurring conflicts. And they can and will evolve out of that, but they do need to know, and I feel like it's my responsibility to tell them, that they need to learn to be a great partner, to be a great listener, to be a great communicator, to be thoughtful, to be flexible and adaptable. And I think those things are possible to learn, and it's easier to learn them while you're young, but it's important to learn at any stage. Now, I know I've hit on some nerves and I've probably spiked your resistance, and maybe you were shaking your head this entire video. I'd love to hear below. Let me know what didn't land for you, what did land for you. And remember, this is me coming from a very specific community and mindset, and you can take what works and leave the rest. I'd love to know what you think works in the comments below. If you want more from me on this, let me know, because I'd be very happy to go deeper and further, or make a part 2, or get more specific and flesh out one of the points that I made briefly here. Keep on living that hifam life, and I'll see you in the next video.